Sheel, thanks for doing this. We have known you for a long time, ever since the earliest days of Kiva. That's how we all met, and I appreciate you taking the time. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's funny. So, I started a fund recently, and so you have to pitch all these LPs, limited partners, and all day, every day, I'm just telling my story. So I've got it down to an art. But actually, what I tell people is my fintech career really began with you two at Kiva. So, before that, I was working in consulting, had no fintech experience, and then my first fintech experience was on the nonprofit side with Matt and Premal back in I guess I was the beginning of 2006. Since then, I went back into consulting, and then I left with a buddy of mine to do a payments company in Chicago. That company got acquired in 2012. I started doing a little.
Right?
It's called Fee Fighters, exactly. Yeah, that company got acquired by Groupon, and after that acquisition, I had a little bit of cash, started doing some investing, found that I really loved investing, and I loved helping companies at the earliest stages. So I started doing that then, and then started this other company. It's an auction company called Innovative Auctions. That company got acquired in 2015. And then I went over to 500 startups who'd invested in Fee Fighters and joined them, started a fintech focused fund there in 2016. And then late last year, me and a buddy of mine, Jake Gibson, decided to start this new fund called Better Tomorrow Ventures. And so over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, I've invested in more than 50 startups, all in the fintech space.
I forget, how did we actually meet you the first time? I just remember you showed up, started working for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So Premal had marketed Kiva through this fellowship called IndieCore. And I think actually at that point, we weren't sure if the fellowship was going to be with Microplace or Kiva. Because I think Premal wasn't sure yet, maybe. And so I applied for this fellowship. They connected me to Premal, and then I moved to India, and that's how it all happened.
What were you doing in India? I remember there was a lot of regulatory hurdles. Kiva didn't actually even work in India, right?
Yeah, so there was, so I moved to India. The idea was at that time, if I recall correctly, India was the thing that people were searching for most on the site, like, on the search bar. I think partially due to the news and Premal being a really big deal, that was what people were searching for. So I moved to India to help try to find Kiva partners in India. And then when I got there, I discovered that we had this issue with the Reserve Bank of India, which was around external commercial borrowing. So after the 97 crisis, the Indian government had basically said, we won't let private institutions take loans from outside of India. And so we got caught up in this issue where if we lent money into India, it would have to stay in India and we couldn't get it out easily. And then, of course, eventually that got solved, but not by me. I spent the whole year there, having accomplished very little.
Were you actually in Bombay meeting with the RBI, or what were you doing?
Yeah, I did meet with the then governor of the RBI. Her name was Usha Thorat.
That's amazing.
And one thing that I found, and I think Matt, you and I have talked about this before, is like, especially at that time, which was, India has changed quite a bit since then, but at that time, being a foreigner afforded you a lot of luxuries. And so I was able to get meetings with literally everybody I wanted to. Like I met with Usha Thorat, but actually before that I had met with this guy Chidambaram. I have to look up what his title is now, but I guess he's currently a member of parliament. But oh yeah, he was union minister of finance. And I was able to meet with all these people. Like in the US, I would never be able to meet with these kind of people. But in India, everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, you came from America, like you came in through this trusted source. Okay, I'll meet with you. and it's interesting. But she did not solve the problem, of course. We still had the problem. Another interesting thing about
how do we actually break through? Premal, I forget the story of
Yeah,
how we
what
actually...
we did is the challenge was you could lend into India if you kept your money in India for 3 years. And the way that the Kiva experience worked is we wanted to tie the repayments to the borrower repayments. And so the Kiva lenders would get the money back as the borrowers were repaying each month. And so that broke the Kiva model. We made it of the 80 countries that Kiva worked in. We made the software fix to keep the money locked in India for 3 years. And instead of you getting your money back, that money would get recycled to another borrower that you didn't pick. So it kind of broke the core Kiva, model. But people were really excited to lend to small businesses in India and people in India. And so I think it worked. And India is interesting. I think all like the BRICS have currency controls essentially, and maybe they're in a position where they can insist on, things that prevent hot money from coming in and out of the country fast.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So let's fast forward to today. So you started your own firm, Better Tomorrow Ventures. What's the theme of that, or do you have a theme, or what are you focused on?
Yeah, so we're focused on seed stage fintech, and within that category, we don't have there's nothing that we absolutely want to do versus absolutely would not do. Although I think, you guys know as well as anyone, I think lending or I would say consumer unsecured lending is probably a category that we, wouldn't necessarily be rushing into. But in general, we look at anything at seed stage in fintech. We have global aspirations. In the past, we've invested in companies in Southeast Asia and Africa, as well as LATAM. And in this new fund as well, we've done 8 deals so far. One of them is in Mexico, one is in Israel, and one is in Canada, but the rest are in the US. We're always looking internationally. I think, I still think the majority of the companies will be in the US, but we'd like to find more great companies in LATAM and Africa in particular.
And it seems like you've always been focused on seed stage investments, like a lot of.
Yeah.
I heard one time you were the most numerous fintech investor in the world by count.
Dubious honor, the dubious honor being the most prolific by count.
Does that work? Is it really just spray and pray, or how careful are you? And why focus on that stage?
So focus on the stage because that's what I like and that's what I know. That's all I've ever done, right? As a founder, my companies, they never got huge. But I love helping get companies from 0 to 1. And it's just what I really enjoy. I think I've had the opportunity to go into funds and be a partner at a place that was a later stage fund. And it happened a couple of times, as I spent time with those funds, I realized that's not what I want to be doing. I just love the early stages. That's what gets me excited. And the earlier you go, the more it is about people, and the later you go, the more it is about numbers and spreadsheets. And you become almost more like an investment banker at the later stages. So that's just not my style. So yeah. I like the early stage. And in terms of spray and pray, how selective are we? I'd say we're pretty selective. Even though we did 50 plus deals, we looked at several thousand deals. That's sort of the nature of the game. And
I'm notorious for foisting deals upon you and send entrepreneurs from all around the world, and it's probably really hard to sift through that. I imagine you have I don't know, dozens of deals a week coming at you through your inbox.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
How do you decide to take that? I mean, do you just take every meeting, or?
No, you can't. So it's interesting because there's this notion, there's this popular notion right now that people should ban warm intros. So like
Oh, yeah.
typically like,
I saw
you know,
that.
if something comes from you or either of you guys, I'd say, oh yeah, these are my friends. I trust, well, maybe not Matt, but Premal.
Yeah.
Matt has foisted too many deals onto me that he didn't want to take.
Foist. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, I'll take it seriously. But there's this notion that you should just take whatever comes into your inbox, and I don't know who these people are that think they can do that, because my inbox is so like if I took meetings that came into my inbox, there like I would have no time in the day. I'd be working all the time. So I don't know who these people are that think that like that is an acceptable way to do it. Now, like it's even hard for me to sift through the emails that come in, and like it's actually not even just on email. Like the notion, like because you're a venture capitalist and like, you know, people think like, okay, you have money, let me try to reach you however. So like people message me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. It's like on every category, people are like, even like somehow somebody will get my number and they'll WhatsApp me.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
People are always just trying to get in front of you. And you know, sometimes that works actually. It's not like I don't look at cold emails. I do. It's just, it's hard to make yourself stand out though, because there's so many of those. Have
you ever just had an amazing deal come that way? Just completely random out of nowhere?
No, but I've had some deals that I really liked, didn't quite get there on, but this one guy, I remember he sent me an email, and the subject of it was, I'm 21 years old and I own a bank, talk to me. And I thought, wow, I want to talk to this guy, young guy. And then, you know, I really liked everything he was doing, except for like, I had a fundamental flaw with his business that I didn't like, but I spent a lot of time with him. So that came in through a cold. One of my best performing companies, actually, Chipper Catch, it's an African company. Yeah. These guys kind of like hustled their way into me, and like they didn't have very good connections. And so like it was a multi-layered connection to get to me. But then I took the meeting and I really liked the guys, and now their company's doing really well. And so I think people who hustle and show that they can get, you know, that itself is a hurdle that like, if you can't get to me somehow, then you're probably not going to be able to sell into whoever else you need to sell into. You're probably not going to be able to recruit the best talent, etc. I think the basic tips are like, be concise. So if you first have an email, like really quickly tell me what you do. It's surprising to me, you know, having been in fintech for 5 years, there's still so many companies that I meet that after 5-10 minutes, sometimes after 30 minutes, I still don't know what the company does. And that you could say, well, like, Sheel, you just don't understand. Entirely possible. But like, I've seen a lot of companies, and if I don't understand, that's your fault, not my fault. Yeah. Like, it's your job to make me understand.
What are people talking about if they're not talking about their product? Like,
you know, they're talking
what
about,
else could you possibly? Like,
yeah, a lot of times people will talk about the problem, and then I'll say, okay, like, I understand the problem. The problem is real. And then they'll keep talking about the problem, and then they like won't ever get to why their solution is any different from everything else out there, or they won't actually get to what their solution even is. So there's a lot of that out there that is, you know, it's weird. Like, all I do is look at fintech companies. If you can't help me understand what it is, then, you know, there's a problem.
Sheel, what's you know, fintech has a pretty broad definition for you. Like, I feel like, you know, it's not just savings, insurance, credit to customers. I feel like you guys are willing to look at all sorts of things. That and kind of have a pretty wide definition. Like, how does BTV define it now?
Yeah, so I think of it as, so first of all, we take a very broad definition, but I think at its core, fintech is infrastructure to exchange resources with people that you don't necessarily know, and it could be a trusted or non-trusted party. And I think that's like at the core of finance as a whole. And then where we look beyond that, and our tagline is everything is fintech. It's because like payments, lending, insurance, we think will be embedded into a lot of companies in the future. And so an example would be, let's say Uber. So Uber, everybody knows the company. Part of what it does at its core is actually a payments facilitation, right? Like you used to have to use your credit card in the taxi, but now because of Uber, you don't have to. But there are several more elements of it that I think make it a fintech company, including like how they transact with their drivers. So there's a payments component there, but then also there's like, their driver has to sign up to get a bank account to become an Uber driver. And, Uber has tossed around the idea of themselves being a bank for their drivers. So all these things we think of as fintech, but then also companies like MindBody Online or Shopify or Toast that are the operating system for a small business that a business is in all day. We think all of those are a phenomenal place to layer in financial services. And we think in the future, the same way that like there used to be companies 10 years ago, you'd invest in a company and call it a mobile company. It's kind of crazy to think about, what is a mobile company today? Every company is a mobile company. Like you haven't, right? And so we think in the future, many more companies will be fintech companies.
And in terms of region, Premal and I have raised, we've tried to raise a lot of money for our business, which works in India, Africa, more emerging markets type places. And it's always been a struggle. It's never been easy to raise money, even if our numbers are amazing. I noticed that changing a bit, but you did mention that you're still focused on North America. What is so hard about investing in economies like Nigeria or India or just a more emerging market, and why are US investors a little bit more hesitant to do that?
Yeah, I'd say, so I'd say the majority of our investments will probably be in North America. We're totally open beyond it. But in terms of what makes it hard to invest outside of the US, it's really like an understanding of the market. There's so many companies nowadays that it's really hard for me to get an entire lay of the land. Like, to give you an example, just in the past few months, I've seen 4 or 5 different plaid for Africas. Yeah. And I think I pinged you about a couple of them. But, without being in that ecosystem all the time, it's really hard for me to know what's really working out there. And I rely on people like you who are very helpful, but still, like, I'm not on the ground. It's a lot harder. But that being said, like, I love the region and I would like to do more there. I do think Africa is going to be the growth story of the next decade. All of the demographics are right. Like Nigeria, especially, but many other parts of sub-Saharan Africa, I think, are going to be an amazing growth story. So I'd like to invest more.
Yeah, I heard you say that, and I, obviously we agree because that's where our work is. But sometimes when I try to raise money, people come back with statistics like, okay, but the economy of Kenya is roughly as large as the economy of Jacksonville, Florida, or the GDP of Nigeria, although it's a massive country by population, the GDP is the size of Belgium. So is it just a growth story from a small number, or do you actually view the total addressable market as actually becoming huge financially in the coming decade or two?
Yeah, I think it's, so you're right. Like the raw GDP numbers are low, but actually I think what's really interesting is it's been so underinvested and the infrastructure has been so bad that like that's where there's a dislocation. That's where there's an opportunity. There's a huge population, right? Like 1.2 billion people, and they're growing at some insane rate. I think it's like 6% a year or something. Don't quote me on that. Obviously, I haven't looked it up. Yet only 20% of people on the continent have bank accounts. And then if you look at the growth in smartphone penetration, for example, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing continent to be on for smartphones, for smartphone manufacturers. And so I think where there's opportunity is because there's this dislocation of a big population, and it is growing, and GDP is also really growing. And so I think the size of the market, while important, is less important than the growth, because if you're a startup, what you're betting on is the growth and being on that like growth trajectory. So that's sort of how we look at it.
Almost out of time. I wanted to get in a question about your experience with Zoom Bachelor. How did it go? Looking back, was it everything you imagined?
Yeah, it was really fun. So for those of you who don't know, Zoom Bachelor was a bachelor style show, but all over Zoom. It was broadcast on Twitch. And there was first the Zoom Bachelorette. I was one of 12 of the guys on the Zoom Bachelorette show. I lost, but they decided to make me the Bachelor. So then there were 12 women vying for my affection. It happened a couple months ago. It was really fun. There were all sorts of competitions. It was just a great experience
you raised
overall.
a lot for charity.
Raised $100,000 for charity. It was great. Being in the Zoom Bachelorette actually ended up circuitously landing me in a Justin Bieber music video. It was really fun. And you know, I went. Anna is the woman that I ended up winning the Zoom Bachelor, or winning my heart on the show. We got Zoom engaged, as they say, and then we went out a couple more times. But I think we weren't feeling a spark. We've remained friends and continue to text back and forth, but I don't think it's going to go to the next level.
So you actually
folks. People were wondering. People have been tweeting at us, kind of saying, "Well, what's the deal?" So it's
this whole podcast. This whole podcast
is minds must know.
Yeah, totally.
We just wanted to get to that.
Give us some life philosophy. I mean, you know, why I ask is one of the things that I really appreciate about you is from our time at Kiva, when you were living out in India, you lived on a couple of bucks a day. As long as I've known you, like, it's not like fancy things. I mean, you know, you have the wealth that you could kind of go get really sucked into that lifestyle, but like you're still, you know, at a bodega looking for, you know, the cheapest avocados. And, you know, I like how, I mean, there are things that kind of govern the way you live that I think, you know, are helpful to talk about, that can, you know, What are some things that you do that are a little different? What are some philosophies that you hold that are worth sharing?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I think the frugality started out as like I think an immigrant mindset that my parents really had. You know, when my parents came here, they were living off my dad's stipend and, you know, having to save every penny, and that continued throughout their life. And then, you know, to your point, now I don't need to be saving every penny. But to me, in many ways, it's a game. Like, it's gamifying my own life, and I love it. I love playing this game. So that's sort of like one thing. I think in general, if you want less, if you want fewer things in life, you can be happier. And so I think I've trained myself to just not be desiring of much, and that has made me a really happy person. Part of it, though, was actually, you know, etched during my time at Kiva, because, you know, I was a management consultant before then, doing reasonably well at that age in life. And then I moved to India, and I was living on 2,000 rupees a month, which is very little, $60. And I found that actually I was enjoying my life just as much or more. And I realized that actually very few of the things that make me happy involve any money at all. Like, what I want is, you know, to laugh a lot, to be surrounded by intelligent people, to, like, appreciate beauty in nature, to learn things about the world. All of these things you don't really need much money for. And I travel the world quite a bit, but it's actually not a big expense. So I'd say that's probably my number one philosophy. The other philosophy I have is like, I'll try a lot of things, and I'm relatively unafraid of failure. I think a lot of people are just really afraid to try things because they think like they're going to be bad at them. They think people are going to laugh at them. But I think the only way that people ever have success is to subject themselves to failure time and time again. And maybe there's the odd person who was successful the first time they tried something, but for the most part, I think you have to try stuff you've never done and be okay with failure in order to be the best that you can be. So that's sort of another element that I really try to live in my life, and I've never been afraid of being laughed at. And I do all sorts of things that I think many people think are stupid, but that's I enjoy it.
It's not your Twitter, it's your Instagram, which hopefully is open to the public, because I feel like every day
Open to the
there's
public,
something
yeah.
really
Yeah.
fun that you're posting.
I'm at Pitdesi, Pittdesi, on Instagram and Twitter. And fun fact, I gained this screen name in 1995. It was an AOL screen name, first one. It stands
Nice.
for Pittsburgh Indian, and it was originally Pittdesi, but I was using a product called AOL, which let you get into AOL for free. And then I
Wow.
got caught, and then they
AOL.
banned that screen name, Pitdesi, Pittdesi. So I took off one of the T's, and that stuck, and I've had it ever since.
Do you remember? I was reflecting the other day on the first time I used the internet. It was to download guitar tablature. My guitar teacher said, "Hey, there's an internet," and I asked my dad to get the internet, and I downloaded like every Cat Stevens guitar tablature in the early '90s. What was the first thing you used the internet for?
So it depends on if you count BBSs as internet, but I was on the BBSs, and I would use my parents, use the phone and call something, and then I'd be doing a lot of chatting, and then downloading of MIDI files, which were precursor to
I did that.
MP3s.
Those are amazing.
It was great. And then playing video games. I'd say those were the things that I really wanted to do at that age.
Premal, what's your first internet experience?
I remember
brutal honesty.
No, I'll tell you brutal honesty. We didn't have internet. It was just terrible my senior year in high school. So really, I felt like kind of the first internet experiences were at college in 1994 at Stanford. And I remember it was a lot of those same things. We played this game Marathon a lot, which is actually just, I don't know if you'd just be doing computer research, but I was just sucked into this multiplayer shooter game.
I remember being addicted to Misc Market in the same way that, people have been addicted to like Hacker News, where like, you're constantly every 10 minutes, you want to see what's on there.
It's like
those
Reddit.
are the days. It's like Reddit. Yeah. Text only Reddit.
Yeah.
I think we did it.
That was fun, guys.
It.
Thanks for joining.
Good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Glad to do it.
Thanks a lot. All right. Bye, guys.